Beginning of the year, I made a video about Nick Cannon where he said he didn't want any more kids after welcoming his 8th child. Only a miraculous 7 months later, he welcomes his 9th child into the world while announcing the pregnancy of his 10th and 11th child. In this video, we'll be reacting to the explosion of the news on Twitter and what Nick Cannon has proven about Christian marriage.
Ruslan.
Different strokes for different folks, they say. Live out and express your inner truth, they say. Do what thou will, they say. Why are we talking about this today? Well, because Nick Cannon is the son of a pastor, a minister, and has Christian roots, as well as chosen to make himself a voice in these contentious conversations. He's jumped out the window and said things like monogamy is a Eurocentric idea that's mainly about property and owning women. True quotes. And so as he welcomes his 10th and 11th child, the implications of this with regards to how would society function if every person was this way, how would society function if no person was this way, if more people were monogamous? What are the proper boundaries that God has for men and women in the confines of marriage? What about polygamy in the Bible? So many different things to get into, but first I want to play a quick clip from one of Nick Cannon's children mothers, I don't want to say baby mamas, but you guys know what I mean. And it's a quick clip. Forgive me if there's a tad bit of footage, cleavage here. I couldn't clip it out any other way. But here are some of her thoughts with regards to her dynamic with Nick. So check this out really quick.
A good support system that I never sit back and think of the lack of. Nick does his best to be a present co-parent, a present parent, a present father, and that's all I could ask for. I know friends.
So she said that's all she can ask for, but at the beginning, she says this.
If not, what is it like to be in a partnership that you can't have a 50-50 parent in?
I mean, granted, he's very spread thin, but
So Nick is very spread thin. He is, has a lot of responsibilities. And so on the surface of this, people would say, well, hey, if he can take care of all of them, what's the big deal? If he is providing for them, what's the big deal? And I would agree that, hey, providing for your kids is a huge, huge responsibility. We should be providing for our children. But provision is not just monetary. See, oftentimes we think that all children need from men is the financial aspect. A roof over their head, food in their belly, clothes on their back, and that's all it requires. But actual fatherhood, actual parenting, and actual masculine role models requires for us as men to be present and in the home. So when we see the scriptures and Jesus echoes Genesis where it says God created the male and female, for this reason a man would leave his mother and father and cleave to his wife, we see the intentionality that God has for our species, for our people to be in a one man, one woman covenantal marriage. And anything outside of that is outside of God's design and is sinful. But many people say, how about polygamy? Isn't Nick Cannon like a modern high-value man who is really just like the men of the Old Testament who were polygamous, even though the New Testament doesn't recommend polygamy at all? What about polygamy in the Bible? And I would point you to this and consider this, that if we look at the time of the scriptures, it's not that polygamy was specifically prescribed by God. It's that polygamy was permitted by God in a specific time where our society was substantially more patriotic than it is today. Okay? By patriarchy, I mean women actually didn't have rights to do anything. So she could either be a wife to a man with multiple wives, or she could be a slave, or worse, a prostitute. There wasn't a lot of options for women in those sorts of societies. And so God allowed polygamy for a season so that that was the less of all the evils, if you will. But you don't see polygamy prescribed. And whenever you see a man like Solomon or a man like David with a bunch of different wives, or you see Abraham with a bunch of, right, it never ends well. It's not a good thing, because we know, those of us that have been married, it takes enough effort and enough energy and enough focus and enough responsibility and enough commitment to be faithful to one woman and to raise children that are stable, healthy, and functioning in one household than to have them spread out all over across multiple households. And even if they weren't spread out, what would that look like in the same household? Probably wouldn't work. And so as Nick Cannon has repeatedly jumped out the window and repeatedly made asinine statements like monogamy is a Eurocentric idea that's about property rights, when he's repeatedly made these sorts of statements that men are naturally, you know, in their element, would prefer to have lots and lots of different women. Okay, maybe they would, but that doesn't mean that what we naturally want is what's best for us. I know a lot of men that would naturally want to lay around and play video games all day. That doesn't mean that's what's best for us. It doesn't mean that if we are called to be a specific way, we just do what naturally feels good. You live your life seeking what naturally feels good, you're going to end up in a lot of trouble pursuing those natural desires. And so I think Nick Cannon, of all people, surprisingly, drives home the point that if you want a healthy, stable society, it goes back to the necessity of the nuclear family. You can open up the floodgates to one man, many women. You can open up the floodgates to multiple men and multiple women together. You can open up all that kind of stuff. But what you realize very quickly is that this isn't functional, that this isn't optimal, that this isn't the best. And somebody cracked the joke on Twitter, and they said, what is the fight for Nick Cannon's estate going to look like when he's gone? Because Nick Cannon is a very successful man. Kudos to him. He's done very well. But I think the fact that he's coming up in a Christian home, he knows right from wrong, that he's coming up in a time where he's just kind of wanting to do what he wants to do, to procreate and be the modern day version of Abraham in his mind. I don't know what he's thinking. Genghis Khan? What is the point here, right? He's continuing this, and the consequences of this, I don't think he's going to understand until much later, that to be a godly father, it does require you to be present in your home. It doesn't just require you to provide, though I think providing is a big factor. It also requires for you to be present. It also requires for you to be available. It also requires for you to be within proximity. It requires you to be engaged. And so it's an interesting time that we live in, because from one standpoint, he's getting dragged all over Twitter for this. But from the other standpoint, isn't this what society is promoting? Isn't this what people want? Regardless on what side you're on, regardless on if you're on the loony side with the far fringe fourth wave feminism, and hey, women can do whatever they want, sex positivity, or you're on the other fringe of the side, where you're on the Andrew Tates and the red pill theology and philosophy about, you know, proxology, about, hey, man, powerful men should have multiple women. Isn't this what society is playing out? So regardless on what you feel about sex positivity and feminism, or what you feel about men's rights, this is the logical conclusion. This is how this plays out. You have one man who's capable, that can have as many women as he wants. And how does this play out? And is this good for society? Is this optimal? We could be sober and say, probably not. He could do what he wants. That's his business. But when this is demonstrated and the society is like gawking at it, but at the same time is the very single thing that it's promoting, it's hilarious. It's hilarious, right? And so you will never see examples of polygamy as the prescriptive in Scripture. You'll always see polygamy as something that was permitted and tolerated, not as something that was promoted and celebrated, whether it's polyamory, whatever. But again, these are the logical conclusions of how this stuff is going to play out. And if this is what you want, hey man, just know that it's going to come with consequences that you aren't quite aware of yet. So those are my thoughts on this whole Nick Cannon situation, and hopefully this drives home and proves the point that God's design for marriage was optimal, that I don't even have to show you any more empirical evidence to prove this point. And if you guys want to hear my original video about Nick Cannon and this whole debacle and some of the wild things he said about this and some of the conflict he feels about not being there for more of his kids, I'll pin that up over here. I'll see you over there, all right? Peace.